Happy New Year. We're into 2025. So let's talk about how we wrapped up 24 and what happened in December and talk a little bit about what's going to happen or what we think is going to happen over the coming months and the rest of 2025. So
Hmm.
if I look back on December, it was slow. Obviously, we had a lot less sales happening in December, but that's historically what happens in December.
Yeah.
Uh, have a big drop off from November, and it's a quiet time of year. Things don't usually start to pick up till late January. So, what are your thoughts? What have you been seeing out there? What have you been experiencing?
Yeah, it felt like as we got into fall, November in particular, it felt like things were picking up a little bit. I think mostly that was people just trying to wrap up whatever their plans were before the holidays, which is not unusual. And as you pointed out, December starts to get quiet. If you haven't made a move on something by the first or second week of December, it's probably not going to be happening until the new year. So I mean, the data all shows that, and really, even the little uptick that I felt, and that's just my experience, in October and November. Um, I don't think any of the data, community wise or city wise, really shows any dramatic changes, and it's been that way largely since I guess about December or January. Well, call it January of 2023. So much of the last 2 years, mostly flat, little uptick here and there, but largely no major changes. And I think there's a lot of folks that kind of wonder, well, if that's the case and our sales volumes are down, does that mean we've got a lot of pent-up demand on the sidelines? And I think there is. But at what point do people pull the trigger? And what kind of things are they watching? Are they watching, political things? We got a new president in the US coming up in just a few days from now. And then rate cuts. I mean, that was the big story, especially the last half of 2024. We've had what, five in a row, and there's many that think more are coming. I think they'll be a little bit less aggressive on the cuts, but doesn't mean we won't see one or two more.
Well, I mean, if we look back and kind of look at 2024, what happened when we got into that, and as realtors, we see the spring market starting earlier and earlier. But when we look at the spring market of 24, when you got into February, and even though it's winter, it's really the beginning of the spring market. As we got into February, we started to see more and more chatter happening.
Mhm.
March had an uptick in activity over the previous year. We had the first rate announcement of significance on April 7th, is what people were waiting to hear. And people were waiting to find out, was that going to be the beginning of the reductions? And and there was a lot of pent up energy going into that, people getting anxious and thinking, okay, let's get out and beat the rush. And we saw demand and we saw sales pick up heading into that period. When April 7th happened and they held, I think there was a collective sigh of relief almost, and people kind of backed off, said, okay, we don't have to rush out and do something now. And the market dropped and
Yeah.
it stayed dropped. And every review after that was a reduction. We had five reviews after that. We had two half-point cuts and three quarter-point cuts.
Yep.
And every single one of them, everybody thought there was going to be, okay, now it's going to happen. And it didn't. And it just stayed flat. And there was little spikes here and there, but I don't think that was outside of the norm that was happening. And then we come into the end of 2024. We've now had five reductions. We're down 175 basis points. Your prime rate for borrowing right now is at 5.45. Variables have now picked up again as being a predominant market product that people are looking at, mortgage product people are looking at, and simply because they believe there's more rate reductions coming and they want to capitalize on it. But at the flip side of all that, the bond market's been going up, which means fixed rates haven't dropped at the same rate.
Right.
So there's been a lot of things happening there that's kept that market in that kind of dormant mode. Now we're in 2025, and January is always a slow start. I mean, everybody's still in a
Yeah.
slumber, and it probably won't be till the end of the month before we actually see stuff. But we're starting to hear the chatter again. Now, completely my own synopsis or an analyst analysis of what I think's coming.
Yeah.
Um, with the rate reduction, the first one of the year being on January 29th, the Bank of Canada has already indicated that there will be more reductions, but they're going to be far more subdued to what we saw in the last 6 months. With that happening, though, I think what's happening is everybody's waiting for it to hit the bottom.
Yeah.
And that's when people want to buy. So all these buyers that are out there are looking at a couple of things. What is my qualifying mortgage that I'm going to be at? What's my interest rate going to be? And am I going to get the best deal? Am I going to buy a house today, but then see that the price drop 50,000 more in 6 months?
Right.
That's what people are trying to avoid. But the thing is, you don't know you're at the bottom until you start coming back up again.
Exactly.
So
Now,
my
last
message
year,
is,
though, with those five rate cuts you talked about, the Bank of Canada was fairly open in saying there will likely be more to come. So when
yes,
buyers heard that there'll be additional rate cuts, well, they thought, well, let's wait for the next one. And now is that narrative starting to change a little bit, where it's likely to be a bit more subdued, and maybe you only get a quarter point or two for several months.
yeah,
Maybe this is the bottom. And
it could
it's
be,
hard to
but
say, but you've got a wild card with Trump, so we'll leave that for now. But the thing with sellers, I mean, I keep hearing, oh, let's wait for spring. Let's wait for the grass to be green. And sometimes that is the right time, but more often than not, if you've got a huge influx of sellers hitting the market at that point, buyers don't come back with the same vengeance, you're going to have potentially an uptick in inventory, which isn't going to help pricing.
no,
I
it's
think the
not.
sellers who want to get ahead of that, as you say, like early spring market, maybe that's beginning of February or even end of January, depending on where you're at and getting the house ready. But I think that's a wise move, but I think for buyers, I don't think they should expect much more wild drops in rate. I'm not saying there won't be rates, but I don't think you're going to see dramatic changes.
If you look at the rate, this is always a balancing act, rate versus price, right?
Yeah.
Like we want to get the lowest rate, but it comes a tipping point when all of a sudden the rates get to a point where activity starts to pick up, which starts to drive up price.
Mhm.
You'll always save more money on the side that you're buying lower than you will on a lower rate. Because rates are you're not locking into a mortgage for life, you're locking into a
Right.
mortgage for the period that you're in.
Yeah.
And because of that, you can always have, sorry, my dogs are barking, someone's at the door. You'll always have a point come where is it worthwhile signing on to this mortgage because I'm going to get a better deal on the house versus what I'm going to save on the other side? Because your mortgage is going to renew, whether it's going to be in 3 years or 5 years or whatever else, you're always going to, that's going to change. But you could get a better deal on the buy now. So from a buyer perspective, trying to time the bottom is a really risky strategy.
If,
What I
if,
tell
if you
people,
pull it off, I'd say it's luck more than anything.
more than anything, it's luck. I mean, none of us can predict when it's going to happen. So my message is always to buyers, like buy when you find the right house and when it's the right time for you. And on the flip side, from the sell side, we have a lot of clients that have been sitting back waiting for this spring market coming. And they
Yeah.
didn't do it last year because we didn't have the same momentum going into the market. But on the flip side now, we've got sellers that have been saying, okay, we're gonna go for the spring market. Timing's going to be huge for that, right? It's going to be huge in the sense that if you miss that window of beating everybody out there, you could be lumped in with that excess of inventory that's coming. So
Yeah,
you're better off being one of 10 houses selling versus one of 100,
exactly.
right? So things to be concerned about there are absolutely going to be around timing and what's going on. And I don't think interest rates are going to play a massive role in that. I
I
think it's
don't
going
think
to be
so.
inventory
As
that's
I
going to
said,
play.
the narrative last year was that more rate cuts were coming. I'm not saying there won't be more, but you're not going to see five in the next 6 months. I think you might see a couple quarter points, and that might be it.
Yep.
Um, you need to see what's going to happen with tariffs. So yeah, as I was saying before, the Bank of Canada had a kind of a strong message, or at least they were relatively open in saying that there were more rate cuts coming. We haven't really heard that tune as of the last one, and I think really what we have to do is just watch and see. There might be a couple more rate cuts, who knows? But there's too many variables, and with Trump coming in, there might be tariffs which could affect jobs in Canada. Remains to be seen. We don't know how that's going to play out. I suspect our next video will talk a lot more about that.
Yep.
But at any time, all you can do is work with the market you have and with the information you have. So we'll deal with that. If things change in 4 or 6 months, we'll talk about that then. And for buyers and sellers, they'll assess those variables and how they affect them at that time.
I agree. And, I mean, to the point on interest rates and everything else, the Bank of Canada, yeah, they've said there's more coming and they've quieted down a little bit on that. They did indicate that the rate would be a slower pace than what we saw in 2024.
Yeah.
Um, So all those things are information being put in front of us that again are fluid. We don't know how they're going to change up, down, or back and forth. A lot of things coming. And like you said, John, we deal with the market that we're in today, and what's coming in the future, nobody knows. We're going to deal with that on a day by day basis. But there is a lot of pent up demand out there, and people are only going to wait so long before they decide it's time to make a move. And whether that's because they're ready to buy a house, their financing is improved, maybe just some people out there that need to sell because their personal situation has changed. You're always going to see transactions happening in home selling.
Mhm.
It's a matter of when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, and when it's your time to get into the market. And all these other things that are going on, absolutely, they have an impact. But you got to look at what's right for you at your time, and that's when you should be jumping in and making a move.
Absolutely. And so for anybody in those situations, I mean, that's what we put a newsletter out and we encourage people to reach out and we can assess the value of their home in the current market conditions, talk about what's happening, talk about a strategy and a game plan that factors in their needs. And of course, that offer is always open.
And that's exactly it. I mean, we try to educate people through these videos and through our market news updates and things like that on what's happened, and try to give people insight on what we think of what is happening or going to happen. But everybody's situation, every market, every neighborhood, every community is going to be different, and every single client's needs are going to be different. So the best way to know where you stand is to reach out to us and let's start that conversation. So let's hope 2025 ends up being a great year for everybody. I think there's a lot of potential out there. I think once we get through the political bluster that's going on over the next several weeks or months, once that kind of settles down, I think there's a lot of potential out there for our market to be strong and to do well, and a lot of people to take advantage of it.
I agree completely.
All right. Well, until next time, we'll have a lot to talk about the next time as well. But let's keep an eye on what's going on, and all the best.
All right. Sounds good. Talk then.
All right. All the best, John. Take care.